Hi everyone, my name is Susan Jones and I am so excited to bring you this new math presentation. It's called Quick Math Routines to Spiral Review Skills All Year Long. I don't know about you, but I am a first grade teacher and sometimes our math curriculum and pacing moves so quickly that I don't feel like all of my students have mastered the skills that they need to keep building on one another to progress throughout the year. So I have implemented a bunch of these different routines in my own classroom this year, and I'm excited to share them with you in case you can use them as well. Before we dive right into the presentation, I just want to take a moment and share a little bit about myself. My name again is Susan Jones. I've spent 11 or so years in education, most of which has been in a first grade as a first grade teacher. I've also spent a few years as a K-2 literacy teacher. I spent a few years subbing while I was home with my boys, and then I've been creating curriculum over on TPT for about 11 years. Now, I know this is a math presentation, but if you're familiar with the science of reading, just so you know, I am Orton Gillingham trained as well as letters trained, and both of those trainings are two of the most valuable trainings I have taken in my career. Many of you might know me from YouTube. I actually started a YouTube channel called Susan Jones Teaching back in 2019, and my goal for that channel was always to take the latest and greatest research, kind of condense it for K-2, and make a video about it to share with teachers currently in the classroom. Now that I am back in the classroom, I also share weekly kind of what we are up to in class, what activities are working, what's not working, how I would change it, and it's a great way to connect with other teachers. I do live up here in Massachusetts, and like that last bullet point says, I am always learning. I am a forever educator, forever a teacher and a learner, and I just love to get new information about how to teach my students in the best ways possible. I assume you are like that too because you are here at this conference, and I'm excited to get started. All right, the next math routine that I want to bring up as a great way to spiral review some skills, build that number sense, and it's easy to implement is going to be counting routines. So let me share why I love these. We know that counting is one of the earliest math types of skills that our students learn, right? This is before they learn one-to-one correspondence, they learn rote counting aloud. I remember when I was raising Theo and Calvin, still raising them, they're only 8 and 9, but when they were like 3 and 4, I just remember counting things all the time. We would count how many steps we take up and down the stairs. We would count how many pages were in a book. Just this consistent counting over and over, which really just helps develop a student's number sense from a very young age. Any of my really young, like preschool teachers, if you're a mom of young kids, you know this. But continuing to build that counting throughout their school years, especially these early ones, sometimes can get forgotten. Maybe not in kindergarten. You guys are probably really good at that. But once we get to first and second grade, sometimes we just zoom right through and we're like, nope, we need to be adding, we need to subtract, we need to learn regrouping. And we don't give our students enough time to practice these counting routines and in different, more challenging ways. Also, I love counting routines, or not routines, but counting in general, have real life applications all the time. Telling time is skip counting. Can they skip count by 5s to figure out what time it is? Counting things like money, counting objects, looking at a scoreboard and understanding how many more points do we need to have a tie? How many more, if it's basketball, you know, we're counting by 2s each time. All of these things we kind of take for granted, and we really want to help develop this number sense through counting. So let's see some of my favorite ways to do that. First and foremost, a very simple way to have a counting routine is to just do some basic circle counting. How high can we go? Have your students sit in a circle. At the beginning of the year, we are starting by 1s. Let's see how high we can go before we make a mistake. Of course, we point out it's okay. We're just challenging ourselves to see how high we can go, right? Of course, we start with 1s, but then very quickly we want to get to skip counting. We want this to become memorized. We do want this rote counting. Yes, we want them to have the conceptual understanding of what counting by 2s means, but this is like a different skill. This right now is we just want them to be able to understand 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. We want them to be able to do that. It's going to help them later on. Yes, we're going to build that conceptual, don't worry. But now once we've gone around, we can count by 1s. Successfully, let's skip count by 2s, 5s, 10s. Let's skip count by 100s, second grade teachers. Let's also remember 2 different things. When we are circle counting, sometimes we can forget to make sure our students start from any number. That's going to be really important. Often we're just like, okay, start at 1. But instead, you can put up like a fun spinner on the board, like a random number spinner, maybe between numbers, 1 and 50, and have it pick a random number. And that's going to be our starting point. Okay, now let's see how high we can count. Also, remember to have students count forward and backwards. As we get into subtraction practice, so many of my students, I always notice, have trouble counting back as a strategy, and that's because they're not fluent in their counting skills yet. So not only should you be picking any number to start from counting forwards, you should be able to pick any number within 120 if you are a first grade teacher, and they should be able to count back from that number or see how far they can go. Also, continue to use those multiples. If I start at 147, or let me go lower. If I start at 97, can I count back by tens until I get close to 0? What would that sound like? Again, with second grade, pick those numbers in the thousands. Can you count back by 100? Can you count back by tens until you get to this number? These quick counting routines are just that. They're quick, they're routines, and they help students practice. Now, down at the bottom, I wrote buzz. This was actually one of the first games I shared over on my YouTube channel. It's been around forever. I am not the creator of this game, but it is a game my students have always loved, and this year proves to be a favorite. I have like 5 games that I always let my students play. They get to pick one every Friday, and I don't know how many Fridays we've had this year, but I can tell you only about 3 or 4 weeks, students have picked a game besides Buzz. They always love it. The way Buzz works is you have everybody stand up in a circle, and you pick a student to start, and they start with the number 1. So I play this first with multiples of 10, and you can definitely have like a 120 chart up for students to help guide them, and you explain what those multiples of 10 are, of course. And then you have students count by 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then whoever's turn it is to say 10 does not say 10. Instead of saying any multiple of 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on, they have to say the word buzz. And whoever says buzz, the next person sits down. So if they accidentally say 10 and they forget to say buzz, they will sit. If they don't know the next number, that student will sit. Or if the person before you said buzz, you sit. And at the beginning of the year, we did not make it very high. Before, like, we didn't get very high. People were just sitting down. They either didn't know the next number that was coming, they didn't know exactly when to say buzz, or they didn't recognize that multiple of 10, I should say, or any other reason, right? They didn't understand it just yet. By this point in the year, we are getting as high as we can possibly get. And even my students who didn't have that strong counting sense are now much, much better at their counting. So Buzz is such a fun one. Also with Buzz, instead of doing multiples of 10, you of course can do multiples of 5, or you can start at any number and make them go higher. Again, it's just a really fun one to implement in your classroom. Now, also, instead of whole group counting or circle counting games, sometimes I just like to have my students go off and count with a partner. I will have them whisper count is what we call it. It's nice and quiet. It's a great way to kind of start your math block, but we can do the same exact types of counting where I have students go off, they sit next to each other, and I say, okay, how high can we go? And they whisper back and forth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they keep going until somebody makes a mistake. And with this one, instead of someone being out like in Buzz, or instead of the feedback, maybe if you don't know the number, being a little more nerve-wracking for students, it's just another person and they can just give you the answer. They can coach you. They can help you with that. Same types of games you can play. How high can we go? You can use that random number wheel or picker, have them do skip counting, starting from any number, go forward, go backwards, all of the same types of things as I mentioned with the circle games, but have them do them with a partner. Again, it's a little less nerve-wracking for students sometimes. Now, there's also a fun game, and I've shared this over on my YouTube channel before, and this is called Cover Up. And I actually have this board for free for you over in the file. But as you can see here, students were playing, and I start with a blank grid. So imagine there's no blue cards on there. You can see that it's skip counting by 2s up to 20. So my students I recognized very quickly were not proficient or fluent in their skip counting by 2s, maybe to 10, and then after that it got pretty rocky. So here they would start, and with the board completely clear, both students would just go through the board and say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. They would point to each box and then the other person would go. Then we would take one of these little index cards and students would cover up one of the numbers while the other partner wasn't looking. So they had to cover one up. Let's pretend he started with the 10 up there. Now the other person has to skip count and say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And if they don't know, they can check it, but they have to try to do it without looking. And then 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. And then the other partner gets to go and they cover one up. And so they're slowly covering up these numbers and practicing that skip counting over and over without getting to see the visual. And it's so many ways, it's just repetitive practice for them, which is great. Now, another thing you can do is also have students not just count forward, but again, have them count backward in the same time. So they can say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. 20, 18. So that is what I did after I taught them how to play this game once or twice. I had them count forwards and backwards. And then, of course, at the end, all the cards are covered, all the numbers are covered, and they still have to practice that counting. So here I did it with 2s. That was something that we really enjoyed and needed in first grade this year, sorry. But you could do this again with any multiples of numbers that you need your students to work on. Also, I know in older grades when they get to like multiplication and let's say they're skip counting by 3s or knowing their 3s facts, they can do that as well. So just another fun little practice game for you.